Everyone. Welcome to Talk Back. It's Monday, October 7th, 2024. And guess what? We're talking again about the elections. We like to say that this is the most important one of our lifetime. Maybe this is. We're going to talk to our special guest today, our Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut, Susan Bysiewicz. Welcome, Susan. It's good to have you, as always.
Well, lovely to be with you. And as we are talking today, we are 27 days away, and it's time for people to make a voting plan because, as you and I were just speaking about, um, early voting is coming up on October 21st, and we want people to understand that they can check that off the list if
Right.
they go ahead and take the opportunity.
Right. We're going to get more detail into that. But first, I want to let people, I know you have been a familiar face in Connecticut politics and Democratic politics, in state politics for many years now. So people should be aware that before you were lieutenant governor, you were not only in the legislature, but you were the secretary of state for many years in Connecticut. And that was part of your function to watch out and supervise elections in the state, right? So you
It
have a
it
lot of
abs it
experience.
I do. I had the great privilege, Sheila, for 12 years to be Secretary of the State of Connecticut, and I followed in the footsteps of people like Ella Grasso, Miles Rappaport, Denise Merrill, and now my colleague Stephanie Thomas is our Secretary of the State, and I was the Chief Elections Official for the state. And some of the things that I advocated for then are now actually our state law right now. So, one of the things that I advocated for was early voting, and that was as a result of constitutional amendment that the voters of Connecticut overwhelmingly chose. And so, this is the first election that we will actually be doing early voting. There was a little bit of a test run, and that test run occurred for the Republican and the Democratic primaries for president. But those were not uh, elections that had a huge participation because, quite honestly, everybody knew who the presidential nominees were going to be.
And then they were also in August, we had some local primary elections, the state representative and the Senate,
We
judge
sure
of
did.
probate. And
Mhm.
some people voted early, but I'm sure that it was much underused in the town halls around the state, right? Very, very. And I always wonder, Susan, what is your theory about this? The government that is most important to us, the services that we get from schools to lights to sidewalks, electricity, I mean, so much happens right in our backyards, and yet we don't vote in the numbers that we should for the local offices, our town, or even the state. How do you explain that? Everyone comes out, and not everyone comes out every 4 years. That's another issue. But how do you explain that? Why do you think that
You
is?
know, you are talking about one of the issues that used to keep me up at night when I was Secretary of the State because the lowest turnout elections are municipal, then state, then the highest turnout is federal. And I'll give you ballpark figures. So for presidential, 80% of people usually participate. State elections, governor, statewide office, 60%. And for local vote, it could be 40% or sadly even less, depending on where it is, if it's a city, if it's a suburb. And I think you're getting at this point, Sheila, that I always used to think that if you have to pick one election to vote in, pick a municipal because the people who are in municipal office, and I know, Sheila, you have been around local government in your hometown for a long time, that it is those decision makers that decide the quality of the schools that your children go to, how high or low your property taxes are, the condition of your roads, the condition of your parks, all of those things that affect your life every day, just to drive to work, to take your kids to school. Uh, those are things that local elections um, control. And that's why I am always so surprised that so few people vote in municipal elections.
Perhaps some of the reasons are that we are so much involved now with social media that is nationwide, worldwide. We don't have the local news that we used to have through the state newspapers. The Hartford Courant used to have a section for every town. We don't have that. And people get disconnected. They're living in their communities as suburban, just drive through places without feeling a sense of attachment to their town. So a lot of those things I think contribute to that sense of I don't really belong here and it's not that important. And anyway, politics is ridiculous anyway, right? I mean, that's what
Well,
you.
and I would say the other thing I would say is because I've been watching mayors and first selectmen and how they communicate with their constituents. So I've noticed that a lot of mayors and first selectmen will do weekly newsletters, and they send out emails every week to their constituents, letting people know there may be road construction, or here's some town events that you might want to participate in, or here are the local boards that are meeting. And I find that people really appreciate that. And so, because of the reasons that you're saying, there is so little coverage of local events. The other thing that I've seen is mayors and first selectmen, especially during COVID, were doing Facebook Live every week, and they would say, "Okay, here's some things you should know this week." And I think that was a great way to communicate. And so I'm always watching to see how local leaders get out information about what they're doing. A lot is by email, but there's a lot of social media too.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual voting. You mentioned 80% of Connecticut people voting in the national election for president. But Susan, that's 80% of just the people who have registered. How many people in Connecticut and in the United States as a whole, I think about 80 million out of 250 eligible 18 and older are not even registered to vote. So what is it? How do we get more people to even register to vote? 80% of the registered voters is not so great when you have millions of people in this country sitting home without even registering. How do you change that? I know you've worked on that issue,
Yes,
but
right. And I'll tell you, it's interesting that now we have seen, since we are getting close to the national election, a surge of voter registration. So the Secretary of the State's office shared with me that in the last month, more than 6,000 people in each congressional district. So, and there are 5 of them. So that's somewhere between 30 and 40,000 new people in Connecticut have registered. And I do think it's because we tend to wait until we have to do things. And I think people are now aware that we have a presidential election coming up. They're seeing the television ads, they're seeing the digital ads on media, and they want to participate and make a difference. And so I think we're starting to see more people registered. And I hope that we will have a very high turnout election in 27 days.
I know we talk about the blue states, the red states, the embattled states, the battleground states. Sometimes people in the blue states say, well, my vote doesn't really matter. But that's not true because you have to tell people you're voting for senator, you're voting for congressman, you're voting for your state legislators, maybe your judge of probate, you're voting for constitutional questions on the ballot. I mean, explain how important it is to vote, even though you think you're in a state where your vote for president may not be as critical as in some other state.
So there's so many important offices on the ballot. So of course, president, then United States Senate, then Congress, then state Senate, state representative, and probate judge in some towns. And in some towns, boards of education are on the ballot. And we're going to be talking about the constitutional question that's on the ballot. But it's important to vote for every office and to be informed about the candidates that are running. And I'll tell you why, because as Secretary of the State, I've had the opportunity to see where there was a tie in a state representative race where there had to be a coin flip. And in the end, the law was changed to provide for a runoff. But we've also seen there was a state representative race in Southington last cycle 2 years ago that was decided by one vote. There was a recount and one vote made the difference. And there was a handful of races just like that. And mind you, people who run for state representative are running to represent a district with 30,000 people in it. So there have been state Senate races that have been decided with less than 100 votes. So, and Joe Courtney will talk about his race where 22 votes.
I think it was 83 votes, something like that, right? Yeah.
It was over 20, less than 30, right? And the reason I remember that is he'll walk into a room and he'll say, you know, there are more people in this room than the number of voters that decided my election. So I think that's why it's so important, because the people that you send to Hartford, the people that you send to Washington are really important, especially when it comes to, reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus rights, things that we are leading on in our state. It's the people that we send to the legislature that decide our minimum wage, which is going up to over $16 an hour as of January 1st, or paid leave. Things that affect people's everyday lives are also decided at the legislature. So
Right.
That's why everybody's important. And, you know, all of us sadly are probably at some point in our lives going to have to work with a probate judge with the passing of a relative, or an elder that needs help, or a child that needs some custodial care. So these are important roles, and I hope that the voters will do their research and take each office that's on the ballot really seriously.
One of the problems, before we get to the nuts and bolts of the actual process, one of the problems that we're facing in this election more than in others is the fact that on social media, there are no journalistic standards anymore that you need to meet. And there's so much misinformation and disinformation flooding the airwaves and the internet. How to fight against that is really critical, because we seem to be in so many ways almost living in two different universes. I want you to comment on that.
So I would just make sure you do your own research, and it's easy from either a federal point of view or a state legislative point of view, because if you would like to check a person's voting record, it's easy to do by looking at the Connecticut General Assembly website, and every vote that a representative or a senator has taken is there. And it's the same thing for our Congress people and our senators. So I would encourage people to do their own research. Also, there are different groups that will make endorsements. And so you may be part of one of those groups. It could be the AFL-CIO, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. It could be a social worker group, a medical group. There may be trusted organizations, and you can look to those. And here's the other great thing I think about Connecticut. We're a little state, we're a small state. So often when you go to the polling places, if you have questions, likely one or all of the legislative candidates are going to be at your polling place. So if you have questions, or one of the candidates for the General Assembly may be showing up at your door to introduce themselves. So that's the great thing about Connecticut is you'll have the opportunity to literally meet a lot of the candidates face to face, even with the Congress people. I see Congress candidates, I'm tripping over them, during the evenings or the weekends when I'm out doing public events. So I think we are lucky in a small state to be able to be literally 1 degree of separation between us and
Couldn't be true. Very true. I know. You feel like you can be close even to your congressman, to your senator. Well, Chris Murphy, who's running, he takes a walk through the state every year, but it stops at almost every town as he's going along. So yeah.
And if you don't go to an event that Dick Blumenthal has been, you don't get out enough because he's
He's everywhere, right? He's everywhere. Very, very true. All right, so let's get to the nuts and bolts. We know that you can go to town hall today. It's only October 7th, and register to vote if you're not. When is the last time you can do that? I think it's even election day. How does that work?
So you may go to your town hall any day between now and election day and register to vote. I would get it done sooner rather than later because you want to make sure you're on the list. But literally, you could show up on November 5th and register to vote because we do have election day registration. Also, you can show up for early voting and register to vote and cast your vote as well. So there's going to be an opportunity starting today all the way through November 5th. So not being registered to vote is not an excuse. You can literally register to vote right up until election day and vote.
Maybe some people should double check that they're registered. You hear stories about secretaries of state or other officials here in some of the southern states, sadly, who are taking people off the rolls for one reason or another. How do you go about checking? I know you can
Very
go
simple.
online and check out.
And that's also a good thing. And my friends who are registrars of voters, and there are 2 in each town, a Democrat and a Republican, who keep the voter rolls of those voters that have registered with a party, along with all of the unaffiliated voters. So if you're wondering whether your voter registration is active, simply call your town hall and speak to the registrar of voters, and they will tell you. And it's a good thing to check on, Sheila, because you become an inactive voter if you have not shown up for 4 years to vote. And so it's okay, you don't have to re-register, but you might want to make sure that you are an active voter. You will become active once you cast your vote. If you've not voted for 4 or more years and you're still on the rolls, you can become active by simply casting your vote. But remember to bring a form of ID with you.
Okay, and a form of ID doesn't have to be just your license or your passport. It could be your social security card or other indications of your identity,
Yes, it
correct?
could be a government ID like a social security card. It could even be a piece of mail showing your name and address, a bank statement, a utility bill, anything like that, because there are a lot of people, especially in cities, that don't have a driver's license because they take public
Right, right.
transportation.
Okay. And now one other issue that we get embroiled in a lot when we make calls on election day, we're calling a kid who's in college. He lives in a town in Connecticut, but he's in college in another state. If you have a college student in your household, how does that work?
So if you have a college student that goes to UConn, this is easy. If they're at UConn stores, you can just go over to the UConn bookstore. They will have early voting set up starting October 21st. So if you're not registered in your hometown, and you want to vote, or you are registered but you want to change to Mansfield stores, you can just go to the bookstore, register in the new location, cast your vote, you're good to go. If, let's say, you are out of state, and I just happened to be talking to a Connecticut resident who goes to Colgate, and I was talking to him and I asked him, how are you planning to vote? Are you going to come back home? He said, oh no, I've already requested an absentee ballot and it will be coming. And those are sent out 30 days before. So if you've already requested one, you should be getting one in the mail. And remember, you got to send it back. Don't forget. And the absentee ballot process is a two-step process. You have to request an absentee ballot in writing, and then you will be mailed the ballot at a later point. So now is the time, if you're a parent or you're a student and you need to remind your child to request the absentee ballot, and if you're the student, reminder to fill out the absentee application and the ballot, make sure you send those back.
So now, while we're on the question of absentee ballots, we all recall how during COVID, the state had a special exemption so that even though you were in the state and you had no other excuse for voting absentee, the fact of COVID-19 made it possible for many of us to get absentee ballots and vote by mail, by absentee. But in Connecticut, you need now an excuse. However, our constitution we are required to get a constitutional amendment to change that to make what we call no excuse absentee voting. So explain that. It's on the ballot this time.
It is. It is. So this year, Connecticut voters will be asked this question: shall the Constitution of the state of Connecticut be amended to allow the General Assembly to allow each voter to vote by absentee ballot? And that means without any excuse, because right now our Constitution says that you must fit into one of the categories in order to vote by absentee. So that includes you are ill, you are out of state, you have a religious practice that precludes you from voting on election day. So now a lot of people, and by the way, with our law the way it is like that, a lot of people are wondering, do I fit in to one of those categories? And so this question is designed to make Connecticut be one of the other 36 states that don't include those exceptions. If you want to vote by absentee ballot, you can, for convenience or for your preference or because it's easier. And so that is the question. And I think that we're going to see a lot of people vote yes, because as you were pointing out, during COVID, we had 40% of the voters took the opportunity to vote by absentee ballot and either put their ballot in the mail or put their ballot in the white box at town hall. People felt safer. People thought that was more convenient. And so I believe that we will see a lot of voters vote yes on the question. But I want to highlight where to look on the ballot, because I've seen the actual ballot. And on most ballots, the constitutional question will be at the very top of the ballot. So when you go into the polling place, look for the question when you are handed the ballot. If you are unclear, ask the ballot clerk to show you where it is, because there is so much print on the ballot. I am very afraid that some people aren't even going to notice, that people are not going to notice the question, which is right above the presidential candidates. So do look for that question and do make your voice heard on the question. Also, make sure you look on both sides of the ballot, because there are a lot of races, and some towns have Board of Education, probate, judge, other offices in addition to president, Congress, Senate, and state legislature. So I just
Some
want to,
ballots are 2 pages, or more than just one side. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Right. So it's interesting that there are some states, especially out in the far west, who use mail-in voting almost exclusively, and they're very successful, and they get high rates of voting. So it would seem like a no-brainer for people to vote for this. Is there any opposition by the opposition party at
So,
all on this?
so I think there are two schools of thought. My my personal preference, as somebody who's been the chief elections official for the state, has been to give people as many ways to vote, make it easier, make it more convenient, because we have very busy lifestyles. A lot of people travel, a lot of people have several jobs. People have various disabilities, so it could be easier for people to vote at home by an absentee ballot than to actually have to travel to a polling place. So that's where I come from. Some people worry about the integrity of the absentee ballot process, and they will cite issues with some Bridgeport mayoral elections as an example. And there have been some abuses, I think, of the absentee ballot process in Bridgeport. But I think by and large, our process has integrity. And I think that it's good to expand opportunities to vote, not make it harder for people. And so that's my perspective. Other people might not agree. And that's why we do have this option, which will be on the ballot. And we're asking the voters to let us know what they believe.
And I think you believe it will pass. It should pass. It's not required.
I do. And I'll tell you why, Sheila, because when we ask people, would you like to have changed the Constitution to allow for early voting? People overwhelmingly said yes. And it's my impression that the lion's share of voters want to make it easier. And the other thing I will tell you, Sheila, is there was a coalition of organizations that are not partisan that are supporting early, no excuse absentee ballot voting. And those organizations are the AFL-CIO, because they have workers that work all kinds of schedules, the League of Women Voters, and Common Cause and Safe Vote organizations that are focused on voting integrity. And the Sierra Club is an example of an organization that thinks that voting should be made easier. So I would be watching also the newspapers, and you will be reading editorials on both sides of the issue. So there's a lot out there if you want to Google some opinions on what's the right thing to do.
So we should have excellent turnout with our early voting now and how easy it is to register up till the day of the election. So talk about the early voting, and it starts on, I think, Monday, October 21st, but it's not till 8 o'clock, right? The early voting hours always, do they always end at 6 p.m.?
So let me tell you about early voting. So early voting will start from October 21st to 31st, and from November 1st to 3rd, and it will be every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., except that on October 29th and 31st, it will be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So most of the early voting days will be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then there are those 2 days, October 29th and October 31st, when people can vote 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you have any questions about early voting, you need to find out information about what the dates, what the times are. Go to myvote.ct.gov. You can also call the Secretary of the State's office at 860-509-6200. And you can also speak with one of your local registrars of voters in your town or your town clerk about absentee ballot voting is the town clerk's office purview. Early voting is a registrar of voters. And of course, if you'd rather vote on November 5th, you absolutely can do that. And on that day, polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on November 5th.
So you were telling us earlier that in Connecticut, in a presidential election year, we have about 80% voting of registered voters. What's your prediction, Susan? Because there's no sense in having early voting unless we get more percentage voting. What do you think it will add to the percentage of people voting this year?
I think it's going to increase it, and here's why I say that. Because I know that there are a lot of very busy political candidates out there for state representative, for state senate, for Congress. Presidential candidates are doing this too. All the candidates are letting people know about early voting, because if you can get your identified supporters to vote at the beginning of early voting, say October 21st, 22nd, et cetera, that it gives you the opportunity to focus on other people, more people, to find more supporters and to get those people to the polls. So because we have so many days of early voting, I think you're going to see a push by the candidates to get people who haven't yet shown up to go and to participate. So I'll go out on a limb and I'm going to say we're going to get 85 to 90% participation.
Remember that.
Okay,
That's
remember
great.
that.
Okay.
I'm going to
Okay.
be optimistic.
All right. I want to
because
touch
we'll
on
have
a
more.
few more topics now that we have you. One, I know you have been so active as a woman legislator. You have been active in working on many projects for girls and women, reproductive rights, domestic violence issues. We have never had a woman president. We've had a woman governor in Connecticut, and you've written a book about her.
And the
You wrote a book
first
about Ella
had,
Grasso.
right. We've had 2 women governors. Ella Grasso was the first. She was elected in 74 and she served until 1980 when she resigned because she had a very lethal form of cancer,
Yeah.
very ill. And then we had Jody Rowell, who was a lieutenant governor like me. And she was someone who stepped up to become governor when Governor Rowland resigned after being charged with public corruption. So we've had a Democrat with El Grasso, and we've had a Republican with Jody Rell, and we have not yet had a female president of the United States. And that's why I personally am very excited about this election. We've had other female candidates for president on both sides of the aisle, but none have been elected. And so this is a historic election for that reason.
You're in the forefront of that. And part of me has believed that since El Grasso, I know Jody Rell was governor, but she was not impelled by her own initiative. She came as a result of the Roland having to step down because of his criminality, right? I mean, so it's a little different. I put her in a little different category. But I always felt we went almost backwards. And then, of course, the Hillary Clinton thing was such a letdown for us. And there are still people in this country who are skeptical of it. We really have to step up, don't we? This year we have to do it this year, don't we?
I'm excited. I'm excited about it. And that's why I want everybody to get out there and to make their voice heard. It's a historic election, truly.
Couple more things, because October is a very special month. Every month seems to have an important cause attached to it. And here we have in October three, besides being very important, October 21st, election begins in Connecticut now. We have Domestic Violence Awareness Month, is the purple flag for this month. We have Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the pink flag. And I don't know if Hispanic Heritage Month is also in October, and the
It goes
Hispanic.
September 15th to October 15th. Yep,
Oh,
there's
okay.
a lot of good things happening. Yeah.
All right. So just give us a couple of words on each of those things. And I would add to domestic violence awareness, elder abuse, which I know the state, through the Attorney General and your office, has had a big push because you've worked on issues of loneliness and isolation, which I'm very involved in elder law and elder abuse issues. So that's part and parcel of the domestic violence awareness thing too. We don't want to leave the elder community out of that.
No,
So,
absolutely,
so
absolutely not.
talk a little bit about those
Sure,
issues.
sure. So, October is awareness, domestic violence awareness month, and on October 8th, our office, along with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, CCADV, will be raising a purple flag over our state capitol at 10 a.m. and anyone is welcome to join us for that. And we will be standing with survivors and with organizations that seek to raise awareness about the resources that are available to those that might be victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and other gender-based violence. There are sadly too many victims. It's estimated that 1 in 4 women have experienced that. Men can be victims too. So we want to not just raise awareness, but let people know where they can get help and what the resources are. People should even know that our paid family leave law gives those that have been victims of domestic violence the opportunity to get medical care, to go to court if they have to, or to participate in any kind of counseling, or to get their family relocated, or to get services to address that. So a lot of people are not aware that that is part of our paid leave program, and that's important to know. And we also, I would say, have done a lot to try to protect our elders from abuse, and there is an office that folks can call to get help, and I'm going to ask Sam Taylor to get me the elder abuse hotline so that we can share it. And for the domestic violence resources, it's easy to visit ctsafeconnect.org or call or text 888-74-2900. So the CCADV domestic violence help can be accessed at 888-774-2900. And our elder justice office hotline number is 860-808-5555. 860-808-5555. If you've been a victim of elder abuse or you suspect elder abuse, that is the number to call. And I also just want to put in a plug that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And that cancer, breast cancer, is the second most common cancer in women. Lung cancer is first, and then breast cancer. And breast cancer accounts for about 30% of all female cancers. And so this is the month where we remind women to get mammograms, to have an ultrasound too, if your physician recommends that because you have dense breasts. That's really important. We have a very high breast cancer rate in Connecticut, and I'll tell you why that is. It's because we have a very aggressive screening program. We have an aggressive set of screening laws that enable women who don't have health insurance or who have income limits to get screened for breast cancer for free. So we have a lot of early detection. And as a result of that early detection, the very good news is that we have a very low mortality rate for breast cancer because we're out there looking for early signs of cancer that can be treated and treated successfully. So fewer women die of breast cancer because of those reasons. And I want to say that it's really important for women who are 40 and over to get a mammogram every year. For women over 20, you should have an annual checkup and talk to your doctor about, given your family history, when it's important to begin mammograms. And it's also really important for women to do breast exams because we are finding that more younger women, particularly women of color, are finding cancer at earlier ages. So October, make sure you get your mammogram, talk to your doctor about when to start that.
Well, there's so much on the line. I want to finish up by just getting your final thoughts, but want to introduce you to the idea that you talked about health care through the Paid Family Leave Act for women with domestic violence issues. And we know that our vote is so important because the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, is threatened. People with pre-existing conditions, including women who have been violated with domestic violence issues, may not be able to access that care necessarily if they get rid of the Affordable Care Act. I know you're a important person in protecting reproductive rights. You have initiatives on protecting transgender people in our community. Our energy, our green, a New Deal or green energy in Connecticut is so important to all of us. Uh, so much is on the line in this election, Susan. Give us some final thoughts on how we need to vote to protect all those values that we hold very important.
Here's what I always think about. So many of us in our family have family members that served in our United States military. I think of two people in my family, my Aunt Mary and my dad. Both my Aunt Mary and my dad were veterans of World War II. They literally put their lives on the line for our freedom to cast our ballots. And every family can remember and honor their family members who served in our U.S. military, and to honor their sacrifice so that we can continue to have the right to elect our leaders. So I always think about all those in my family that sacrificed so we could have this very precious right that many people in other countries do not have. And so I'd ask everyone out there who's watching this to take the opportunity on October 21st through through November 5th to honor their family members who have served by voting.
Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect way to end our discussion. Election day is coming. Listen to everything the Lieutenant Governor has said about the process, why it's important, what are the values that are important to you, and how you must vote to take care of them. So thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. It was always great
Lovely
to
to
have you
see you
on. Oh,
virtually and look forward to doing it again.
yes. See you in person soon, probably at our dot
The
spaghetti
dinner.
supper, probably in Colchester.
All right.
Okay, see everybody next time on Talk Back. Bye.
Thank you.